Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, August 26th, and the last Wednesday of August. Um, for me, that's brings up a lot of memories about going back to school, getting sort of the fall season started in one way, the end of summer. It was also the month of my birthday, or is the month of my birthday, and so it's got I have a lot of feelings during this month, and so I want to start off sharing that because I think that in this conversation where we want to talk more on communication and health, knowing yourself is a really important part of communicating effectively. For instance, knowing when you are sensitive, knowing when you might be triggered, knowing when things are going on for you that if you don't allow to fully settle, whether that's processing or emoting or experiential or activities, if that energy stays inside and it's a difficult energy, could ultimately lead to some breakdown in your ability to express yourself and communicate with others. So I led off today just sharing how this month of August is loaded for me. Maybe for a lot of you too, as we all get into the habit as we're kids of going back to school, the end of summer. So many people talk about that. Very often it's a very positive thing, but sometimes, summer has this association with freedom, liberty, the outdoor space, play, and the end of that for many people reintroduces the idea of confinement, conformity, focus, discipline, all of which obviously have a place, but they could feel differently. And for me in particular, I feel somewhat melancholy during this month. And so the fact of the matter is that I might be, one could say, if you were observing me over time, perhaps my family would chime in with that Michael, you tend to be a little bit more irritable or sensitive during this period of time. And knowing myself may help me address what I can, because it's not in my best interest, and it doesn't work for a lot of my relationships, if I don't find a way to work with that emotional state so that I can stay in a good place when I'm trying to be present for other people. When Robin and I were talking about preparing for this, and what we would introduce today, following up on our conversation last week, where we talked about how health is predicated on our sort of harmonious relationships, meaning if taking the opposite extreme, if our relationships are in chaos, and that could be everything from our interpersonal relationships with others, particularly intimate partners, immediate family, children, parents, friends, coworkers, the social world around us in general, and ourselves. If that's in a state of upheaval, then our nervous system is also going to be in a state of upheaval, and when that happens, then our body does respond with things that might include inflammation, the words arthritis, pain, indigestion, nervousness, gastroenteritis. All these things come up that are where people go, migraine headaches, when their body is inflamed, irritable, and nervous. And so we talked about that last week, and we'll relate to that again this week. But today, when Robin and I were preparing, we wanted to share a little bit about maybe some of the strategies that we could share with you, and that you could adapt if you haven't already, or work more with them to, one, recognize what gets in your way, and two, begin to come up with various practices or methods of communication itself that will help you share and balance out some of those forces of living that could be painful or difficult, require some time of digestion, with the harmony in our relationships that we seek, which is so important to our health more generally. I was going to start off with one of the things that I speak to people about, and I also practice myself, which is that when it comes to communication, almost invariably that means you and somebody else, sometimes more than one person. You're trying to get your feelings known, your thoughts known, appreciated, contemplated. Maybe it's a cooperative thing that you're looking to achieve. Maybe it's just getting a point across. Maybe it's just sharing practical information or just sharing parts of yourself, you want to be able, whenever you sort of have the inclination to do that, of course you want to be able to do that effectively. You want to be able to say what you mean and express what you mean and have it land squarely in the place so that another person would truly understand it and get you. Well, to do that, you need to be in a good place to know yourself, but also to express yourself. And that first part of good communication then is self-care. It's sort of identifying some of those patterns, but also then to work with yourself a little bit so that you're in a good state of mind to pull out of your mind what you want to express, verbally or through energy. So, as an example, when I talk to people about their diet, I'm not just thinking about things like their blood sugar and their cholesterol and their heart and inflammation. I'm thinking about their metabolic balance, the idea that during parts of the day they have the right amount of energy circulating in their body for the various functions the body needs to perform. And for that, there's a different way of approaching food. If you're in an imbalanced state, let's say you are eating foods that are highly glycemic, or you're not eating, you're skipping meals, your metabolism, it affects you, and one of the areas of your body most sensitive is your nervous system, and that means your brain and your mind, and the way that the two things interact for you to be able to express yourself clearly. To think clearly requires being well rested, well fed, well nourished, moving your body, not stagnant. And so those are the self-care things that I often will suggest, and it's almost the same advice I give for everything, including how to prevent heart disease or cancer or Alzheimer's. It's similar. The other thing that I think, though, that is very particularly powerful that Robin thought I should mention is meditation. And in a nutshell, I think the idea is becoming present is the first rule in good communication. You need to be in a calm state of being so that you can extract your thoughts clearly and then express them clearly. And when our mind is really active and there's all sorts of percolating thoughts, many different subjects, we can get easily distracted or at least lose focus. And so meditation is one of those practices, which of course has many attributes. Most powerfully among them, for what maybe meditation was in its highest state can offer, is a spiritual development, is the ability to connect to spirit at the deepest level, which ultimately has you be able to live your life at the deepest level, the most full level. But some people don't go there into spirit right away. They go into meditation as a useful tool to soothe their nervous system, and it does work that way. And so however you want to think of meditation, it is a great strategy. And there's different types of meditation, which I can get into later if there are any questions. But rather than get into that level of detail, let me just turn it over to Robin. I've been speaking quite a bit. And let Robin share some of her thoughts on things that people identify, or when they can recognize that they're not being present, and that's causing some breakdown in their communication, and what comes up for people. And you might call those obstacles or barriers or distractions. Right, how would you phrase it, and what would you say about that?
Right. Well, everything you said makes so much sense. And I want to just sort of go back to when you were sharing about the melancholy feeling that you have during this transitional time, which I think happens to a lot of us, including myself. And you were sharing about knowing yourself and how important it is to be aware of what is actually happening in your inner world. And I think what you're also saying about the meditation is a tool to help us move into a state of being, which we'll call it presence. The known science is now that most disease comes from, we'll call it stress, and it could be, dietary stress or, emotional stress. However, it is key that we are just aware of our nervous systems when we go into that sympathetic state of being, how and what it does to our whole systems. And for emotional and communication wise, it really shuts us down.
Yeah, I think shut us down, sometimes we are so overwhelmed ourselves that we can't express ourselves effectively, or shuts us down in the way that we lose the flow state where we can really express ourselves carefully.
Right.
So we might express ourselves in a maybe, a destructive manner.
Reactive way.
Yeah, reactive
Opposed,
or
responding.
powerful, aggressive, passive aggressive. Things that very often we even can sense is happening while it's happening. We just find it hard to turn it off. But we certainly know after the fact that there's fallout when we express ourselves that way. And that gets makes relationships much more complicated. It requires then a lot more sort of repair communication. So a lot of this, we could break this down into preventative, maintenance and even repair, because there's different levels in our relationships, all of which maybe require a little different type of communication. But the whole idea is, wherever you are, is to be able to express clearly what you're experiencing and do the least damage, especially when you're trying to express something that's personal, that may not be easy for somebody else to hear or to understand. And that's an issue.
Yeah, or that they're different, because we all perceive the world in our own separate ways. So the way you may perceive, a situation may be very different from myself.
Yeah.
And this is where we end up possibly having challenge or conflict.
Right. So one of the, I guess the important things about communication is to appreciate that very fact, which is whatever you believe, there ideally is some respect you have for others, their autonomy, their individuality, which is that perhaps even though you're absolutely sure the sky is blue, that there may just be some reason that somebody else sees it a little bit differently, a different shade. And therefore, if you try to force your definitions, your rules, your
control,
your understanding on somebody, that they must not only hear what you say and understand it, that it's your way, but then it feels like you're imposing it on them. Right. That's when there's often that conflict.
Right. And what we were just talking about is when we don't know where we are from that inner center balanced place, it's very easily to get defended, which is where people may have conflict, where we make it a right or wrong situation, opposed to being able to be clear of what you are feeling and what you are seeing. And then there we will be able to be more apt at seeing the other person's position.
I think that point, the word defended, is an interesting one. So when we think about presence, presence means being in a state of what's happening now is what's happening, maybe all that is, or at least all that needs to be focused on. So you don't need to anticipate something in the future or go back to the past. It is what's in front of you in the moment. When you're defended, you're often, if you think about it, probably not present. Almost by definition, you must be in the past. I didn't do that. I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. So you're already out of the moment where you're trying to hear what somebody else is trying to express as far as their experience. So rather than hear the disappointment or the upset or even the anger, you're into your own defense. You're not in the moment where you're fully connecting with somebody else. Of course, then that's going to likely lead them to feel a second type of irritation, which is now you're not even listening to me.
Right. And you're also putting yourself into that fight or flight experience, which when we're in that state, it's very difficult to come back to the prefrontal cortex. We're a little hijacked. And we know animals, all the blood flows up to, the head, yet the body, we sort of lose our gravity of center.
So fundamental here then is the, again, to reiterate, the point of being present, which then means to allow what somebody else is expressing to be fully expressed while you just try to take it all in, all elements of it, the words themselves, the energy behind the words, the nonverbal cues like body language, trying to appreciate what must be going on for all those things to be manifesting at the moment. And even if you have sort of a sense of a difference in your own interpretation of many of the same things that are being discussed, presence requires, the communication technique here requires that a good listener stays in some sort of pause mode. It doesn't mean you won't have a chance to go back somewhere else, but to fully listen first is a very important practice in communication. Often, what Robin and I, sort of know from our own experience in relationships, our relationship in particular, but ours with all the other people we really care about and in our work, is that if, let's say, this is probably not a new concept for any of you, but the idea is that maybe this re-fortifies the need for you to do some more work in this area, then the idea is maybe not to start with the most challenging, difficult problems that you could face, the most challenging people or conversations, but start off with listening, let's say, to a friend, just share something like the book they're reading, something really not likely to be too triggering, where you just stay present, where you don't have such a hard time staying present, and you take it all in, you allow them to finish each and every sentence, you feel for what they're trying to express beyond words, and you work yourself practicing in an area that is easier, and then eventually building yourself up to things that might be a little bit more complex, that have the chance of triggering you, where you then practice not being triggered, frankly, where you might otherwise get triggered, but the key to communication here is to do what you need to do to stay out of the trigger zone, your own trigger zone, which means the self-care that I talked about earlier, but then some of the other things that maybe you can share with us. What are some of those things then that help somebody stay out of the trigger?
Okay, well, you just mentioned to be aware that you are triggered is really the first step. And when you are aware that you are triggered, then that's where you can call in, you can breathe. Some people do little tricks like they'll just little things, like we were just listening to something that someone would drop their keys on the floor to sort of like pause, anything to pause, So that's the first step, most important. The second is then to come back and to ground yourself in your own body, and then the reflective listening and empathy. These are two really, really important things. And what happens when we're reflecting, and then when we reflect, we're listening because we really have to take in the other person. When we feel threatened, we go into that fight or flight, and we actually stop listening, which I'm repeating myself. However, this is so easily done for all of us. So the cutest little thing, my little grandson watches cartoons. I think I shared last time, one other time on our chats here. And this mama bear and the little bear, when he gets mad, she reflects back to him, I see you're mad, right? That's the first thing that will really bring down any kind of anxiety that we're being seen and acknowledged. The second is, I'm not going to sing it because I don't have a good voice, which is when you're feeling mad and you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4, right? And how simple is that? However, try it. The next time you're feeling yourself, I want to go back to what you'll feel in your body. You may not cognitively know, but you'll feel energies in your body. Your face may get warm. Your heart may be beating, faster. Your muscles may tighten. Those are all signs that we're going into that sympathetic.
Even the urge to speak.
Right.
Right. Even that sort of pressure, I got to say something now, is a sign that, there's something coming up for you. So that's a cue built into your own system, which is, okay, something's going on for me, but I want to stay present because that's so important to this particular relationship and the communication that it requires. So it's coming up. So you said something in terms of techniques that I want to go over, a couple. One was to take a deep breath or count to 4. It's, okay, so you have this urge to say something, you take a deep breath without disconnecting from the other people, maybe silently count to 4. But the other thing you said that I think is a very good practice, a really good concept, is to ground yourself, you said. And so maybe you connect to something concrete like the floor, or you feel the chair you're sitting on, or your feet on the ground, or you register your heart beating because that there's something grounding about the center line in your body. And you just try to reorient yourself, because often when we're triggered, we start to escalate. We start to get away from our heart center. We get somewhere else. And so if we can bring ourselves into the center as a practice, silently while we're still listening, I think that is part of the necessary response of the listener, even in a situation where what they're hearing is causing a little bit of a stir in them. The other thing that before I was thinking about while you were talking before I forget is when you listen to somebody. I mean, this is something I do. Robin, you can tell me what you think about it. But what I do is, I'm listening to the words. I'm listening to, let's say, an explanation, or I'm listening to somebody share feelings or anything. And when it's not, sort of like a black and white thing, like the directions to get to the movie theater, when it's something about somebody sharing something personal,
other than interpersonal,
that's maybe gonna stir you up a little bit. You can listen to the words. I was angry the other day when you did this. Okay, and then you get in, and the person might get into the details. So, and then this happened. But it's good to maybe, as you're listening to the details, keep reminding yourself of the underlying emotion that's being expressed, because sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between what somebody is saying and what they're actually feeling. And if, as a listener, you could really ask yourself the question, what are they feeling now? What are they, there is this story, it led to something like anger, but what are they feeling? Are they feeling disconnected? Are they feeling lonely? Are they feeling neglected? Are they feeling, sort of abandoned? Are they feeling, disappointed? What else is going on to create anger, let's say, as a very common first level emotion? And then if you can feel that, then that's sort of the empathy, right?
That's the curiosity.
That's the idea, that,
yes. Curiosity and
it's
care.
beyond the words now. This person is struggling like any human being would be, feeling disconnected or unloved or not cared for or whatever it is. So it's not you're late, you're, sort of, you got a bad habit. This is, I want to be with you on a regular basis, and I want to not be waiting because I really love being with you. That's what's being expressed.
Right, beautifully said. And so we want to know what are the things that will prevent that from happening. And these are three most common, which are, you mentioned before, not defending yourself, not attacking the other person, like you just mentioned, like, why are you late? Instead, there's feeling that's going on underneath with that person when they're saying, why are you late? So they will feel potentially judged. And the other, which is also really hard and painful and creates separation, is the fleeing. So sometimes people think they don't say anything at all and they're completely silenced, but that's another way of avoidance, or something we call fleeing. So those three things are really important to notice for yourself if that's happening for you. Then you can get to the empathy, compassion, and the curiosity. Curiosity is a good word just to stick to. Be curious. Gee, what is underneath that person, the child who's having a temper tantrum when they have to put their shoes on, right? So it really takes a lot of processing, a lot of plan before you go into difficult conversations, to potentially know that it might be difficult for self and others. And then some of these tools that we're talking about, and there's just three other things. Timing is very important. So you don't want to barge into somebody when they're in the middle of meditation and say, oh my God, the cat just, is hanging from a tree, even though it might be an emergency. But we want to plan a little bit ahead of time. So timing is important. And another very important concept is tone. So it's not what we say, it's how we say it. So we could say things very differently with, honey, would it be possible for you to take the garbage out? Or you didn't take the garbage out again. So, and that's going to fall into criticism and judgment. But once we feel criticized or judged, we are basically right in that sympathetic state in our bodies, which creates us not to be present.
Yeah. And I think you also mentioned a little bit about when somebody is communicating. So even if you're the listener initially and then you're trying to respond, which is another, time for communication, or if you're initiating a conversation, I think it's also useful to think about what the intention of your communication is. So what are you trying to achieve by sharing this information? Let's say it's your emotional state, or it's a decision you'd like to make, or any of those things. So what is your ultimate goal? And especially if it's a person really close to you, you want to maybe be curious enough that, what you will do as you begin is to say, here, this is what I want to achieve with you. I want to get to a point of healing or resolution, or I want to talk about a time we can connect together, and therefore I want to go over our schedules, because connection is what I'm interested in, because healing is what I'm interested in, because something along those lines, as opposed to, let me just share what happened the other day that got me upset. The person who's going to hear that knows you're upset because you just said so, but is not sure what your intention with that is. Is it just to, hit me over the head with it? Is it just to push me away? Is it to disconnect from me? Or is it to heal? I'd like to make some assumptions that it's always for a good reason, but frankly, as I think we all have experienced, sometimes I just don't know. And in my insecurity, which is my issue to work on too, but I'm not confident that somebody always cares about things that I care about. And, when they're upset and angry, I do worry, because my experience has included people who really do want to disconnect with me, that is what's going to happen again. So as a communicator, part of what I think is really useful to do is to start off with, here's what I want to achieve by telling you this or sharing this with you.
Right. That's such a great point.
And I think that will go a long way in helping the person who's now going to listen to stay present.
Yeah.
Because they know where you're going with it. And so they may be less inclined to become defensive too early, because you're demonstrating something important to them too.
Yeah.
And therefore it's more cooperative, it's collaborative. And so that I think is sort of the essence of it today.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. I know we all go through this, we're all human, and especially with all the changes that are going on right now, we're really, really being, I would say the word test, but I'm going to call it upgraded. We are all being called to upgrade our communication, and it starts within ourselves, ground zero here. So thank you all.
Yeah. Speaking of upgrades, next week we're going to try something different, which is to do this program on Facebook Live. So we're going to just test out the different platforms and see how it goes. So I know several of you who we're seeing are here now have been following us on a weekly basis for the last month or so. And we wanted to let you know you're going to find us next week on Facebook Live, which is Slow Medicine Living. Facebook Live, Slow, S-L-O-W, Medicine Living, one word, is our handle for Facebook. And so if you have any doubts, just keep abreast of the newsletters that we're sending out with this announcement. And it'll be at the same time, 12 o'clock next week, but on Facebook Live. And please send us, notes, emails, or anything else about what you want us to speak about. And certainly remember that during our podcasts, that any questions you have, you can type away and we'll see them, and we'll do our best to address them, so that this becomes, if in a way, somewhat more of a dialogue that meets your needs specifically, if you'd like to share that way. Otherwise, just listen to us. We're really happy to be able to sort of connect this way. It's really important for us. It's our personal practice as well to communicate, as an example, and to share our work, which we feel very strongly about is very important complement to all the other things people do for themselves, is to feel part of a community and groups of people who really are talking about things at a level which is not just the concrete, basic, fear responsive model. How do I prevent disease? But how do I thrive? And that's really, sort of the essence of our work. And so thank you again for joining us. We hope you have a great week, end of August. We'll be in September next week, and I'll probably be happier as I go through this period of melancholy. And I look forward to, with Robin, to speaking to you then.
Right.
So take care all, and stay well, safe, happy, and healthy.
Have a blessed week.
Bye-bye.